Next, Senator Marcos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I begin my questioning, and I hope it's not included in my time, but since I just wanted to take this opportunity to address some of the reports that have been coming out. For example, uh, I would like to address it, Chairman Iqbal and the MILF. Uh, we have been advising both sides to undertake confidence building measures in the face of the Mamasapano incident. And the reason we have done this is that it is the people who have the citizenry that have lost faith not only in some of the individuals involved, but also in the entire peace process. And that is why I have called for several steps to be taken as a confidence building measure to restore the trust of the public in the peace process. And that is my main concern, is that the peace process must continue. The peace process must, in fact, at some point, come to a conclusion wherein we find the true and lasting peace for Muslim Mindanao. However, there are disturbing reports coming back from the first item as a confidence building measure that was suggested was the return of the firearms and the equipment of the 44 policemen that were killed. It took 1 month for the MILF to finally return 16 of the weapons that were taken from our policemen. Of those 16, 14 were cannibalized. That is the report that we are getting is that the parts were taken from the weapons and they were changed with the inferior parts. But the point is that what was supposed to be a confidence building measure and an act of good faith has turned into the precise opposite. And this is a classic case of adding insult to injury. Not only, in this case, adding insult to death. And again, then there is the declaration that the commanders that were involved in Mamasapano are not going to be turned over are not going to be identified or turned over, and it will be an internal matter in the MILF. Again, this does not inspire confidence in the public. And the promise of Chairman Iqbal here in the previous hearings that the MILF will assist in the identification and of the finding of Usman and will assist in that, we have not seen any concrete measures. And finally, the last is the clarification of the precisely what is the relationship between the MILF and the BIFF. Blanket denials will not suffice. We need to do more. And that is why I am taking this opportunity. Chairman Iqbal, take it as a piece of advice. I implore you for the sake of the peace process, for the peace process to once again regain the trust of the people, that we have to do better in terms of those confidence building measures. You must communicate to the leadership of the MILF that people are waiting for these trust building measures, these confidence building measures. And when they are partial, they are delayed, and that they do not seem to be done in good faith, that is where we will have a problem. And my positioning and all of this has always been, whatever it takes, we must continue the peace process. The peace process must come to a definitive end wherein we can say there is true and lasting peace in Muslim Mindanao. So, para nyo ng awa sa ating peace process. If we care that much for the peace process, I implore you to advise the MILF leadership to do better in terms of these trust-building measures so that we can move forward with the peace process. Dito, natigil tayo dito eh. And we have lost the trust and confidence of the public. And so that is simply like, that is an advice and a fervent request on my part for Chairman Iqbal, please try to convince the leadership of the MILF that these trust-building measures, these confidence-inspiring measures are important for us to return to the process, the peace process. That is just the manifestation that I would like to put on record, and I hope that the chairman, you take that message back to the MILF leadership. I think that you can verify that after Mamasapano, all that we have been discussing, the two of us, privately and in other venues is how do we move forward. This is the way to move forward, Chairman, and this is the way this must be understood by the leadership of the MILF. These trust building measures are not just talk. They are in fact extremely important for us to return to the process. We have been sidelined by this incident. We must return to the process, and in my view, this is the way to do it. So, Chairman, that is my message to you, and I hope you communicate it to the leadership of the MILF.
Your Honor, would I be permitted to say a few words about the issue?
Yes, sir.
Well, Your Honor, I think the time from January 25 up to the time that we submitted or we returned 16 and one half firearms was not 1 month, but rather 21 days. 21 days, because January 25, and then we had a ceremony at Camp Sionco in that Odin Swat on January 18. So 21 days. 21
Stand
days.
corrected, not 1 month, 3 weeks.
Yeah, 3 weeks po. And then I had to be very frank, Your Honor. You know, when the firearms were turned over to Awang Airport, we did not have the time really to check on the firearms together with my esteemed counterpart from government. We only saw the firearms when they were brought to Camp Sionco. But at any rate, at Camp Sionco, I understand that there was some validation undertaken by military officials or PNP officials. I am not so sure about who really made the validation. And that precise moment also, Your Honor, I was to travel to Manila. So that's why the ceremony was quite cut short to give us time really to board the plane for Manila. If that is true, Your Honor, then it is very regrettable that such kind of situation would happen. I understand the feelings of our friends from the PNP if the report is really true, but we did not have the time, we did not have the opportunity to really check whether such kind of situation really happened. But at any rate, I would vouch for the statement coming from our friends from the PNP that there were parts of the firearms changed for another part. I don't know the technical term for that. But for the MILF, Your Honor, it's not the material consideration that is really very important on our part, but the symbolism, the gesture of goodwill that we want to show to everybody, to our friends from the PNP, that the MILF did not like what happened in Mamasapano. It was a regrettable incident. It was a tragic incident that resulted in the loss of 44 sub-commandos and 18 MILF fighters on that fateful January 25 incident po. So on our part, while we understand the material consideration, but on our part, it is the symbolism po. Yung symbolism po, the gesture of goodwill that we are willing to do anything that is possible for us to do, because we have spent a lot of political capital in convincing our fighters to give us back the firearms so that they would be returned to the PNP. So it took us really hard time for us to convince our commanders and our fighters to return the firearms to the Philippine National Police, because we also spent lives, and then there were also distractions. So that's how I can say about the turns of firearms. And then we also promised that the remaining one firearms will be turned over to the PNP as soon as we would have that firearms with us. And then we still continue, because there is still a probability that firearms are still in the hands of our fighters, and then the personal effects will still, if there is a way, and if there are still remaining firearms and personal effects, then we will also return that personal effects.
Chairman, I agree with you that it is a symbolic gesture. The PNP will continue to function even if they do not get 44 M4s rifles back. That is the symbolism. That is also why the symbolism of good faith is destroyed by the fact that the arms were tampered with first at binalitan ng pyesa bago ibinalik. Ibig sabihin, kinuha yung magandang pyesa, ginamit sa sarili, pinalit ay bulok. And that is ngayon, that ruins the entire symbolic gesture of good faith. Yun ang aking sinasabi. Sayang naman, we had that good opportunity to regain some trust. But anyway, nandyan na yan, and this is why I just bring it up so that we all understand that we are all pushing for the same thing, the continuation of the peace process. The BBL has been suspended. The peace process in that case is suspended. We need to return to that, and the only way to do that is to regain the trust of the people. And we have lost that trust. Those of us who are working for the peace process have lost that trust. We need to regain it. Payo ko lang, advice is perhaps we should do better on both sides. We have been investigating the AFP and the PNP. Now maybe the MILF, the gestures of goodwill need to be more forthright, clearer, because this kind of mixed response is not exactly helpful. Yun lang aking sinasabi, Chairman. At again, this is alang-alang ito na makabalik na tayo sa proseso ng kapayapaan para naman yung ating mga kapatid sa Muslim Mindanao ay hindi na nasasabak sa gera.
Can I continue, Your Honor?
Yes, Chairman.
Yeah, yes. Well, I'm not saying here that what the PNP SAF has reported that there were some reports, there were instances of cannibalizing the firearms. I'm not saying that that is not correct or that is not accurate. But for the sake of really finding the truth, that's, I am still pushing for an independent investigation so that all these things can be investigated and then the truth will really come out. I'm referring to the firearms that are that are reported to have been cannibalized. So if there is a possibility, because it puts the MILF in a bad light, although I'm not saying that the report is not true, but for the sake of authenticity, then there has to be an independent investigation to investigation so that what really happened would be known by everybody. On the issue, Your Honor, about the surrender of MILF combatants, this issue is multidimensional issue. It is a multi-layer issue. It is a very complex issue. To the government, it can be viewed as a legal dimension. It has legal dimension, and I would understand that. But for the MILF, and perhaps our counterpart from government, meaning the government, it has a political dimension because we are engaged in a peace process with the government of the Philippines. And then in our engagement with the government of the Philippines in the peace process, there are agreements and documents signed. So that as far as the MILF, we would look at these documents because these documents are binding on both parties. So in effect, what I'm saying here is that there are mechanisms, there are agreements that would really address such kind of violations by both sides, if there are. I'm referring to the ceasefire agreement between the government and the MILF. I'm referring to the terms of reference of the ad hoc joint action group. So that's my point there. And then maybe we can also look at the third dimension, the issue of violations of human rights. I saw the video, and with all indications, the video is authentic. I saw a hand firing a handgun to a wounded SAF commander. So I would presume, I'm not an expert on this, but I would presume that it is genuine. Meaning, the one that fired that handgun to a wounded SAF is a criminal. The one that took the video is also a criminal. But there are two persons who were businessmen who uploaded the video. They are also criminals. Because why did they uploaded that video? Maybe they said that they have the good intention. But good intention does not always result in good consequences. This time, by uploading the video, then it has generated outrage. It has generated emotions all over this country. So I think if I have to make a request, those who uploaded the video should also be called for in this August body.
Thank you, Chairman. Just since you brought up the video, what would be your response if I could if we have information identifying the shooter in the video. What will you find? Will you help our policemen and AFP find that person and bring them to justice?
Well, if it is in the nature of a war crime, you will submit.
I believe that. Okay, so okay. But anyway, the legalities of it have been discussed at least previously. So again, we will get to the coordination process. So let me now get to my questions, Mr. Chairman. I would like to focus once again on the coordinating processes for of the AJAG and the CCCH, so that when such an occurrence happens, nagka-encounter, paano matigil yung putukan. The shooting started at around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning of Sunday, 25 January, and the ceasefire was at 4 o'clock, although there was still sporadic fighting until the artillery was deployed. So I will ask, since you are in the middle of all of this, you were in the middle, General Galvez, could you give us the narrative? Dahil the AFP report and the report of the peace panel, or rather the GPH Coordinating Committee on the Cessation of Hostilities, the GPNP MILF panels, magkakaiba ng konti sa timing. So General Galvez, give us the narrative when you first heard of this incident and what happened afterwards.
Mr. Chairman, Your Honors, this is the significant incident that happened pertaining to our mechanisms. First, I was able to receive the information pertaining the firefight at 6:38. I was then in Iligan City, sir, taking care of the independent decommissioning board. I'm with all my whole staff in the CCCH government panel. Then afterwards, we organized when we verified that there is really fighting. After 30 minutes of verification to the field units, we immediately organized the Joint Ceasefire Crisis Team, which is involving the IMT, the Joint Ceasefire Secretariat, headed by Mr. Rashid Linjasan, the chairman of the MILF CCH, also with the Joint Ceasefire Monitoring Team. So by 7:30, they were already organized. And then at 9 o'clock, the Joint Ceasefire Crisis Team, composed of this representative, immediately assembles at Cotabato City because the headquarters of the IMT is in Cotabato. Then they proceed to Barangay Kuloy, Saripagwak, to meet with the two base commanders of the 105th and the 118. Ustad Sakaria Goma for the 105th and Wahid Tundok for the 118 base command. Then at 11:30, our team, crisis team, were able to meet the BIAP commanders. And then at 1:15, the different groups that have been organized, one group will take care of the opposing forces, while the other group will be taking care of the government forces. So at 1:15, they were able to go to the tactical command post of the government forces. And then also at that time, I was able to report with General Pangilinan to really assess the situation. Like General Pangilinan, the information came to us in trickles, so we did not know the real picture. So during the time, I conferred with the AJAG and the division commander, and we assessed the situation. And then at around 3 p.m., we proceeded to the tactical command post at Saripagwak. And during the time that we are traveling, I received a report from Major Sol that we have 26 killed already verified by the Joint Ceasefire Monitoring Team. and I texted, I remember I texted the West Mincom commander at around 3:30 p.m. Then at 4 p.m., we affect the total ceasefire, despite that there are also some sporadic firing on the areas of the 84th SAF. That's the time that we knew that there are other groups that had been encountered by the IFF and other groups. And then also on the 5:20, the crisis team goes back to the engagement site with two tractors, hand tractors, and an ambulance to start the retrieval operation. And about the same time, Major Sol received a phone call from me. I called Colonel Sol that there is another group that have been being fired upon by unknown protagonist. And then I called up Rashid Lijasan that there are still firing on the other side of the river. And he said to us that the MILF already withdrew from Tucanalnipaw and they already repositioned away from the encounter site. And he said that, sir, pwede nyo na engage na kasi hindi na sa amin yan. So that's the time that I already told the 6th Division Commander that sir, the MILF will completely withdrew from the area.
Thank you, General Galvez. General Orense, since you are the GPH adjunct, could you give your own narrative as to the events surrounding the Mamasapano incident?
Yes, sir. Actually, sa what I have stated before, I was awakened by a call from an unknown source, but I answered it, and it was Police Director Napenya, sir. And he informed me that they were going to operate. They were going to operate, and he asked me if I could coordinate with my counterpart in the AJAG, Attorney Dataya. And I told him, sir, bakit naman ura-urada? He told me that medyo confidential kasi yung mission. So sabi ko sa kanya, I will do my best effort. He informed me also that it is in coordination or with the Maguindanao PPO. So the first thing I did was I called up Colonel Hoxon, the Maguindanao Police Director, and asked him if he knew about the operation. And he informed me that he did not know about it. Then I called up Colonel Feliciano, the commander of the 601 Brigade, and I asked him if he knew about the operation. And he told me that he did not know about it. Anyway, since I believe that my commander was still sleeping at the time, resting still at the time, I took the casual initiative to inform or to direct Colonel Feliciano to give assistance and support to Police Director Napeñas at that time. So that's what I did. And he said he would do the support operation for Police Director Napeñas. Later on, it was Police Director Napeñas who called up and informed me also that at about 5 minutes after our first conversation, he told me that they were already withdrawing from the area. So what came to my mind was that there would no longer be a cause for an alarm. So I again called up Colonel Feliciano. I told him to provide assistance to General Napeñas. Before that, sir, I called up the Attorney Dataya, but again, I was not able to reach him. Then I called up Colonel Feliciano, and I told him to provide assistance to the withdrawing SAP element. In fact, I remember I told him, bahala ka na, because I know for a while that he knew his area of operation more than me. So that was my call to Colonel Feliciano. And after that, at around past 6, I think, I called up again Attorney Dataya, and the phone just kept on ringing. And about 7:31, Attorney Dataya called up, and we had a conversation. The reason why he was not able to reply, he told me that the reason why he was not able to reply to my call. But he asked me what happened, and I told him, yeah, what happened to the area in Mamasapano, and I just asked him what we could do about it. I actually, sir, before that, I remember Colonel Galvez called me and informed me that something was actually happening in Mamasapano. That was only at the time that I was able to get a full grasp of what's happening in Mamasapano. And incidentally, Attorney Dataya called me, and that's the time that I asked him what we can do about it, and he said he would call Camp Darapanan and and inform his principals about it.
At, let me understand the process. Ano? The process is that the adjugs first will coordinate, and then the CCCH will then, kumbaga kayo ang adjug yung strategy, yung CCCH ang tactics na kayo talagang makikipag-usap. And that is the process. So where the two narratives agree is that at 11:45, the Joint Ceasefire Crisis Team met with the commander of 105th MILF. Is that correct? Were you present at that meeting, General Galvez?
Sir, I'm still traveling from, I'm already on Cotabato City from Iligan, sir. I think 11:30, sir. Yes, sir. They already arrived at Tuloy.
So at 12, from the first indication of at about 6:30, where the government learned of the government CCCH learned of this ongoing encounter. It took you about 5 hours to arrive at the CCCH to arrive at the camp.
Yes,
of Commander Guma of the 105th of MILF.
So the problem is the CCCH, the main bulk of the CCCH then is escorting the IDD.
Escorting?
We are escorting the Independent Decommissioning Board at Iligan City. If we have the prior knowledge, we will immediately go to Cotabato City. The problem now is being the representative of as the chairman, it is very, very vital that I'm supposed to be at the
What
site.
I'm trying to do here is trying to find ways to shorten that time.
Yes, sir.
The time from 6:30 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon is an alarmingly long time.
Yes, sir.
And as we now know, by 1 o'clock, all 44 that were dead, but were killed, were already dead.
Yes,
So we have to, it took you until 12:30 to talk. Now, what was the agreement arrived at the meeting with the commander of 105th? Ustad Sakaria Goma, who's the base commander of 105th.
Sir, to effect the ceasefire, sir, through going through the protagonist, individual protagonist, by having two joint ceasefire teams.
But by your own declaration, you were only able to say that the ceasefire had actually begun at 4 p.m. Why is that?
When already the engagement and gun battle started, there is a need for physical presence on the ground. And you cannot just penetrate on the ground without coordinations with the protagonist. And there is a necessity really that the two teams should be visible on the ground because you cannot separate them.
The JCCT was already in a dialogue with the commander at 11:45.
Sir, the house of Sakaria Goma is still more or less 25 to 30 minutes going to the area.
But that still brings you only until noon time. What happened from noon to 4 p.m.? Why was there continued fighting?
Sir, there is an attempt to enter immediately, but the fighting is still ongoing. That's why
That's what I'm trying to get at. How do we shorten that period from the time that you contact the commanders of the MILF saying that these are government troops that are being fired upon until the actual ceasefire. That we want to shorten that process. Why did it take so long? Maybe Chairman Iqbal, you can help us here. Since the commander of the 105th, the commander Goma, had already been informed by, let us say, 11:30, that the troops in front of them were government troops. Why did the fighting not stop?
On the side, on my side, Your Honor, we have an internal arrangement that although I am the chair of the MLF's panel, and directly the CCCH will report to me, but on operational matters, our arrangement is that the head of the CCCH would report directly to the highest military commander of the MLF. So that, in effect, what happened was that it was only around 11 o'clock that I was informed about the fighting in Mamasapano.
Yes,
and we had a meeting during that time.
Understood. But that is exactly what happened. They went to the highest MILF commander at 11:30. To include travel time, by 12 o'clock, he should have been able to tell his men to cease fire.
No, Your Honor, it's about my information about the encounter, not the information of the CCCH to our highest military commander. That has been ongoing already.
No. The question, Chairman, is why did it take so long for the MILF side to stop shooting at our policemen from 11:30 until 4 o'clock? That's a very long time. It's 4.5 hours.
I think the CCCH of government and the MILF are in a better position to explain that. But it was an encounter, and the volume of firing is so large and so great that practically people cannot penetrate the battle zone.
But you see from the text messages that the PNP SAF was already beginning to withdraw. We have learned that at 1 o'clock, some of the reinforcements that the army sent were also being told to withdraw. How come we do not have the corresponding orders from the MILF side to withdraw?
I have no personal knowledge about that, Your Honor.
Okay, well, that is one of the things that we really have to look that I am looking at, so that we can improve the system in the BBL. Maybe Professor Ferrer or Sec Gindeles, maybe you can help us with this. How do we make it better?
Sir, there's no substitute for coordination on this matter.
But they had coordinated. They started coordinating at 6. Never mind the
They
coordination.
they had to meet
beforehand.
and discuss the strategy, and they did that at 11 o'clock at the house of Zakaria Goma, one of the commander, together with the commander of the 118, which was who is Wahid Tundok. They had to agree on a strategy. They met in a different municipality, which is not Mamasapano. It was in a different municipality, and then they went back to undertake their own respective
Aren't
assignments.
those, you say they have to agree on a strategy. Aren't those set in place already? Those we call them. We've been referring to them as mechanisms.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Your Honor. But they had to agree as who will do what. For instance, who will go to the MILF side to tell them at the same time that the message is being transmitted to the SAF side. Because it cannot happen that one will stop fighting and the other will still continue fighting, and everybody will think that there's no ceasefire again. Therefore, it had to be coordinated well on both sides. And in this case, the only way to communicate it to the fighters of the MILF was to go there physically, to call on them, because the text messages were not working. The cell phone communication was not very good.
But General Galvez already at 10:34 sent the text to Ladyasan saying we already gave advice to the PNP to cease fire. They had
Yes,
already
sir.
done
That is advice. You have to implement it on the ground. And Ladyasan could not enter the place until about 1:30 when they attempted. But when the shooting still continued, they had to withdraw because this team, Your Honor, were not armed. They came there without arms. They entered the area and they tried to separate the forces.
So we have not established some kind of communication, a hotline even, that we can always communicate with the commanders that there is this crisis that has to be resolved.
If there was a clear line of command at that time, sir, then maybe the communication would have been established on both sides. But at that time, the lines of command were not very clear on the side of the MILF, because this was not a planned operation on their part. This was spontaneous action on the part of the people there who were confronted with that kind of situation. There was no communication between their commander and the people on the ground, which meant that the commander had to actually go there to tell them to stop firing.
The commander did not have coordination with the people who were actually doing the fighting.
No, sir, because they did not know that there was going to be a fight.
So, but once the fight had started, hindi niya
Yes, sir. They had to go there. They had
hindi
to
na niya makausap yung
Hindi
tao
na
niya.
po, kasi pati yung communication line, maybe if you go to the area, you will find that the signal is not very good in that area.
Fair enough. Maybe those are the things that we can improve on. General Galvez, in the form of a critique, how would you suggest that we shorten the time from the time that this crisis begins until a ceasefire is declared? Paano natin pagandahin at maging wag naman na 11 hours, kahit naman isang oras man lang, minutes rather than hours sana?
Sir, I believe you're right that we have some sort of a communication line, like a hotline. But I would like also to emphasize that, sir, by experience, it's really very hard that to separate two opposing forces when they started. I have an experience recently on February 15, wherein the Basilan-based commander, 104th Brigade, conducted same strike operations against the ASG. He informed me at 10 o'clock in the evening, and 5:30 they strike, and they informed me. So with that prior knowledge on the 10 o'clock in the evening, it gave me necessary time to prepare. Who will contact who, what, and when? In this case, we are in a.
How did that work? Please explain to us how that communication, that coordination that you say is, how did that work?
Sir, last February 15, I was informed by 104th Brigade Commander Colonel Bautista about the test mission of the SR will be striking an important terrain under the ASG that will cut off Makalang and the Makalang under Norhasan, and also will cut off the Corelem. He informed me 30. He said, Bok, we will operate tomorrow morning at 5:30. So please inform the higher quarters and higher echelon of the it's only not within 24 hours. And then at 5:30, when the operation started, I immediately called Lanjasan. Then I immediately called the Western Front commander of the
Your Honor, I'm sorry. May I interject? Can we just remind the general here to not be too specific in his response, because these are operations, and I think these are still ongoing operations. So security matters, Your Honors.
General Galvez, upon the advice, please limit yourself to the processes of coordination between the ADJAGs and the CCCH.
So I believe that the important thing here is at the multiple level. For example, in my case as chairman, and also I will operate at the level of the chairman, the Western Front commander, and then the 104th Brigade commander will go to 114th BC, and then also the ADJAG counterpart with the MILF and the GPH. During the time, the distance between the MILF and the AAP is only 100 meters. But the coordination was made that a radio was put on the MILF camp using our radio in the two camps of the MILF. So in this, to cut it short, in this kind of operation, prior knowledge is very important, so that the CCCH and the ADJAG will have at least enough preparation on the coordination matters between the MILF. The secrecy of the operation still was maintained, but the coordination was made very succinctly and very swiftly.
Well, when things go according perfectly as planned, then it all works out. But when how many plans go perfectly as planned? So that's why this is what we have to prepare for. So anyway, I will just I will probably conduct an entire hearing just on this process. So Sec Gindeles, please, if you can prepare, and then General Galvez, General Orense, if you can prepare some of the suggestions that you might have that we can put into the BBL. Ilagay na natin sa batas para maging matibay ang coordination process na hindi na mangyari ulit ito. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Marcos. Our
Madam Chair, excuse me, Madam Chair,
yes, Secretary De Lima.
just to be of help on that point, on the processes, I just need to share this. May I call the attention of the committee about revised joint AFP-PNP operational guidelines for the ADJAG. This was promulgated, or this is dated July 23, 2013, because of the line of questioning of Senator Marcos. There's a specific provision about, and this goes, during law enforcement operations, AFP-PNP shall establish direct linkage with GPH forces in the area. In case armed confrontation is about to happen or is happening between the AFP-PNP and MILF forces as a result of law enforcement operations coordinated by the ADJAG, the GPH ADJAG shall simultaneously inform GPH ADJAG Corps and CCH components to resolve the situation. If conflict escalates, ADJAG shall refer the matter to higher authorities. But we do not know exactly what higher authorities are being referred to in this particular provision. Indeed, I was also going over this issuance or issuances, because there have been several operational guidelines already on the matter. It seems that there are several provisions which are rather ambiguous and susceptible to varying interpretations. The coordination, the 24-hour rule, and then this one. Who exactly are the higher authorities that need to be consulted when the conflict or the fighting escalates? So for the guidance, Your Honor, of this committee.
Madam Chair, if I may just respond, I would be my committee that is actually hearing the Bangsamoro Basic Law would be would find it very useful for any observations that the Secretary De Lima would like to give us, so that we can incorporate it into our discussions and then find ways to, as I said, strengthen and make more robust this entire system, so we no longer have this kind of crisis. Thank you, Madam Chairman and Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Senator Marcos.
There are disturbing reports coming back from the first item as a confidence building measure that was suggested was the return of the firearms and the equipment of the 44 policemen that were killed. It took 1 month for the MILF to finally return 16 of the weapons that were taken from our policemen. Of those 16, 14 were cannibalized. That is the report that we are getting, is that the parts were taken from the weapons and they were changed with the inferior parts. But the point is that what was supposed to be a confidence building measure and an act of good faith has turned into the precise opposite. And this is a classic case of adding insult to injury. Not only, in this case, adding insult to death. And again, then there is the declaration that the commanders that were involved in Mamasapano convinced the leadership of the MILF that these trust-building measures, these confidence-inspiring measures are important for us to return to the process, the peace process. That is just the manifestation that I would like to put on record, and I hope that the chairman, you take that message back to the MILF leadership. I think that you can verify that after Mamasapano, all that we have been discussing, the two of us, privately and in other venues, is how do we move forward. This is the way to move forward, Chairman, and this is the way this must be understood by the leadership of the MILF. These trust-building measures are not just is not just talk. They are, in fact, extremely important for us to return to the process. We have been sidelined by this incident. We must return to the process. And in my view, this is the way to do it. So, Chairman, that is my message to you, and I hope you communicate it to the leadership of the MILF. Communicate to the leadership of the MILF that people are waiting for these trust building measures, these confidence building measures. And when they are partial, they are delayed, and that they do not seem to be done in good faith, that is where we will have a problem. And my positioning and all of this has always been, whatever it takes, we must continue the peace process. The peace process must come to a definitive end wherein we can say there is true and lasting peace in Muslim Mindanao. So, para nyo ng awa sa ating peace process. If we care that much for the peace process, I implore you to advise the MILF leadership to do better in terms of these trust-building measures so that we can move forward with the peace process. Dito, natigil tayo dito eh. And we have lost the trust and confidence of the public. And so that is simply like, that is an advice and a fervent request on my part for Chairman Iqbal, please, try to, are not going to be turned over are not going to be identified or turned over, and it will be an internal matter in the MILF. Again, this does not inspire confidence in the public. And the promise of Chairman Iqbal here in the previous hearings that the MILF will assist in the identification and of the finding of Usman, and will assist in that, we have not seen any concrete measures. And finally, the last is the clarification of the precisely what is the relationship between the MILF and the BIFF. Blanket denials will not suffice. We need to do more. And that is why I am taking this opportunity. Chairman Iqbal, take it as a piece of advice. I implore you for the sake of the peace process, for the peace process to once again regain the trust of the people, that we have to do better in terms of those confidence-building measures. You must communicate.
Next, Senator Marcos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I begin my questioning, and I hope it's not included in my time, but since I just wanted to take this opportunity to address some of the reports that have been coming out. For example, I would like to address it to Chairman Iqbal and the MILF. We have been advising both sides to undertake confidence-building measures in the face of the Mamasapano incident. And the reason we have done this is that it is the people who have the citizenry that have lost faith, not only in some of the individuals involved, but also in the entire peace process. And that is why I have called for several steps to be taken as a confidence-building measure to restore the trust of the public in the peace process. And that is my main concern, is that the peace process must continue. The peace process must, in fact, at some point, come to a conclusion wherein we find the true and lasting peace for Muslim Mindanao. However,